Veltar stood at the airlock door and tried to calm his nerves. In his 300 years as a diplomat, he had met dozens of new species. Most followed the same pattern. They were afraid, confused, and eager to please the powerful Galactic Confederation. They wanted protection, technology, and guidance. They begged to join the safety of the greater galaxy. But the humans were different already. The message had been simple and direct. Welcome to our ship. We look forward to meeting you. Please bring whatever you need to be comfortable. No formal protocols, no lists of demands or requests for military protection. Just an invitation, like they were welcoming an old friend. The queue, airlock hissed open. Veltar stepped through and found himself face to face with a tall human male. The creature had dark hair and kind eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform with no weapons visible. Ambassador Veltar? The human asked. His voice was warm and steady. I'm Captain Lee Dong-ho. Welcome aboard the New Soul. Veltar had expected guards, formal ceremonies, or at least some sign of nervousness. Instead, the captain simply smiled and gestured down a well-lit corridor. How was your journey? Lee asked as they walked. I hope our docking systems worked properly. We're still learning about your ship designs. It was adequate, Veltar replied carefully. He was already taking notes in his mind. Humans asked personal questions immediately. They showed concern for comfort and safety. Most species focused only on political matters during first contact. The corridor was clean, but lived in. Veltar saw artwork on the walls, paintings and photographs that seemed to show various worlds and star systems. Children's drawings were mixed in with professional pieces. Everything felt warm and welcoming rather than sterile and official. We've prepared quarters for you near our diplomatic section, Lee continued. Dr. Park So-jin will be your main contact. She studies alien cultures and speaks several galactic languages. She's excited to meet you. They passed a large window. Veltar stopped to look out at the human fleet. 12 ships of various sizes moved in loose formation. They weren't military vessels. They looked more like floating cities. Gardens were visible through transparent sections. Solar collectors spread like wings. Everything looked peaceful and purposeful. Colony ships, Lee explained, noticing Veltar's interest. We're heading to establish a new settlement in the Kepler 442 system. It'll be our 15th colony beyond Earth. 15th? Veltar was surprised. Most new species barely managed 1 or 2 colonies before seeking Confederation protection. Yes, we've been expanding steadily for about 50 years now. Nothing too ambitious, just building homes where we can. Lee spoke like this was completely normal. They reached a comfortable room with a large bed, desk, and viewing window. The furniture looked sturdy but simple. A small device sat on the desk. That's a translator and communication unit, Lee said. Dr. Park programmed it with your language files. Press the blue button if you need anything at all, food, medical attention, entertainment, or just someone to talk to. Veltar set down his travel case and looked around. This is quite generous. Most species provide only basic facilities during initial contact. Lee looked confused. Why would we do that? You're our guest. We want you to be comfortable while we get to know each other. But we haven't established any treaties yet. For all you know, I could be gathering intelligence or planning an invasion. The human captain actually laughed. It was a warm, genuine sound. Ambassador, you traveled here alone in a small diplomatic ship. If you were planning an invasion, you'd probably bring more backup. He paused, then added more seriously. Besides, everyone deserves basic hospitality. That's just being decent. After Lee left, Veltar spent time recording his initial observations. Human behavior was already outside normal patterns. They showed trust before establishing formal agreements. They offered comfort without requiring anything in return. They seemed genuinely interested in friendship rather than just political advantage. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. Veltar opened it to find a human female carrying a tray of food. She had short black hair and intelligent eyes behind small glasses. Hello, Ambassador. I'm Dr. Park So-jin. I brought some food options since we weren't sure what you might be able to eat. She set the tray on his desk. It held several small dishes with different colored substances. "This is plant matter, this is synthetic protein, and this is a mineral supplement," she explained. "All are safe for silicon-based life forms according to our databases. But please don't feel obligated to try anything that seems wrong." Veltar was impressed by the thoughtfulness. "You researched my species' dietary needs?" "Of course, basic preparation for hosting guests." Dr. Park sat down across from him. "I hope you don't mind, but I'm very curious about your culture. We've never met silicon-based sapients before. What's it like having crystalline thought processes?" For the next 2 hours they talked. Dr. Park asked intelligent questions about Veltar's homeworld, family structure, and personal interests. She shared information about human culture, their art, their history, and their dreams for the future. She spoke about her own work, studying how different species thought and communicated. What struck Veltar most was her genuine curiosity. She wasn't gathering intelligence or looking for weaknesses. She simply wanted to understand and connect. When he mentioned his interest in geological formations, she immediately suggested showing him the ship's mineral collection. "We've been gathering samples from every world we've visited," she explained as they walked to a large laboratory. "Not just for scientific study, but because they're beautiful." The lab was impressive. Humans had collected thousands of rock and crystal samples from dozens of worlds. Each was carefully labeled with location, date, and mineral composition. But they were also displayed as art, with special lighting to show their natural beauty. "This one's from our second colony," Dr. Park said, pointing to a purple crystal formation. "The whole mountain range was made of this mineral. When the sun set, the entire landscape turned violet. Our colonists call it Purple Peak." Veltar touched the crystal gently. His species could sense the geological history in such formations. This sample told a story of millions of years of slow formation, pressure, and time. "Your people appreciate the deep time in these stones?" "Some do. Geologist Yoon Bora says rocks are the universe's way of keeping memories." She could talk for hours about what each sample represents. Dr. Park smiled. "Would you like to meet her? She'd love to compare notes with someone who can actually sense geological history." They found engineer Yoon Bora in the ship's maintenance section. She was a small woman with strong hands and bright eyes. When Dr. Park explained Veltar's geological sensitivity, Yoon Bora's face lit up with excitement. "Really? You can feel the history in stone?" she asked. "What do you sense from this?" She held up a small red rock. Veltar concentrated and felt the story within it. Volcanic formation, rapid cooling, extreme pressure followed by sudden release. Violence and creation combined. Yoon Bora nodded enthusiastically. "That's from Mount Vesuvius on Earth. It was formed during a massive eruption that destroyed entire cities. But from that destruction, incredible fertile soil was created. Death and life together." They spent an hour discussing geology, mineral formation, and the stories that rocks could tell. Yoon Bora showed him samples from Earth, from human colonies, and from asteroids they'd passed. Each one had meaning beyond its scientific value. "Humans seem to find personal significance in everything," Veltar observed. "Don't you?" Yoon Bora asked. "I mean, these rocks are like books written by the universe itself. Each one survived incredible journeys to end up here with us. That's got to mean something." That evening, Veltar was invited to join the ship's communal dinner. The main hall was filled with hundreds of humans of all ages. Families sat together, but strangers were welcomed at any table. Children ran between the adults, playing games and laughing. Captain Lee introduced Veltar to the gathered crowd. Instead of formal speeches or diplomatic protocols, the humans simply clapped and called out welcomes. Several people approached to ask questions or share stories about their homeworlds. Commander Kim Tae-won, the security chief, sat down next to Veltar. He was a serious man with careful eyes, but his manner was friendly. "First time dealing with humans?" Kim asked. "Yes. Your species is quite different from standard first contact protocols." Kim nodded. "Most aliens seem surprised by us. They expect us to be more formal, I guess." or more afraid. He paused to watch a group of children playing nearby. But fear's not really useful unless something's actually dangerous, and formal's just a way of keeping distance between people. Your people don't seem concerned about potential threats from unknown species. Oh, we're concerned, Kim said seriously. That's my job, but being concerned doesn't mean being hostile or unfriendly. We prepare for problems, but we hope for friendship. He gestured around the room. These people left everything they knew to build something new among the stars. They're not going to let fear stop them from living. As the evening continued, Veltar observed human social patterns. They formed small groups easily but welcomed newcomers without suspicion. They shared food, stories, and laughter freely. Three weeks had passed since Veltar arrived on the new Sol. Every day brought new surprises about human behavior. Today, he was watching something that should have been impossible. Humans having fun while floating in the vacuum of space. It's called zero-gravity handball, explained Han Minho, a young technician who had become Veltar's unofficial guide. They stood at the observation deck watching dozens of humans in spacesuits playing games in the open space between ships. The players moved through 3 dimensions, bouncing a ball off floating barriers and trying to score goals. They laughed and shouted over their communication systems. When someone made a particularly good shot, the others cheered loud enough to be heard through the radio static. But this serves no practical purpose, Veltar observed. And it's dangerous. A suit malfunction could be fatal. Sure, there's some risk, Han admitted. But life's got to be more than just staying safe, right? Besides, everyone out there is a trained engineer or pilot. They know their equipment. He grinned. And watch this. Someone's about to score. A human woman spun through a complex maneuver, ricocheted off 2 barriers, and sent the ball flying through a narrow goal. Her teammates erupted in celebration, spinning and tumbling in their excitement. Humans engage in recreational risk-taking for emotional satisfaction, Veltar noted in his recorder. They seem to require regular stimulation beyond basic survival needs. Is that unusual? Han asked. Don't your people do things just for fun? Veltar considered this. His species found satisfaction in contemplation, in the slow appreciation of geological beauty, in mathematical harmony. But they didn't seek excitement or physical challenge. We find fulfillment in different ways. Huh. That's interesting. What kind of things make you happy? The question caught Veltar off guard. Most species asked about his people's technology, military strength, or political systems. Han wanted to know about happiness. I enjoy studying crystal formations. The patterns and structures that form over millions of years. There's beauty in such permanence. Han nodded seriously. That sounds peaceful. I bet you'd like Young Woo-sung's work. He's our agricultural specialist. But he's been studying the crystal formations in the asteroids we're passing. He says they tell stories about how the solar system formed. They found Jung in the hydroponics bay, surrounded by growing plants and mineral samples. He was a quiet man with gentle hands who spoke softly to both his plants and his crystals. Ambassador Veltar, Jung smiled warmly. Minho said you might want to see my collection. Jung's workspace was fascinating. He had somehow combined plant biology with geological study. Crystals grew alongside vegetables. Rock samples sat next to seed trays. Everything was arranged, with careful attention to both scientific accuracy and artistic beauty. I'm trying to understand how living systems and mineral systems interact, Jung explained. Plants can influence crystal growth through their root chemistry, and certain minerals help plants grow stronger and healthier. Veltar examined a small crystal that was growing around a plant's roots. He could sense the slow interaction between living tissue and mineral structure. This is remarkable. You're creating hybrid systems. Nature does it all the time, Jung said. I'm just trying to learn from the process. Look at this. He showed Veltar a section where plants were actually growing inside crystal matrices. The crystals provided structure and minerals while the plants provided organic compounds and growth factors. The result was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Your people combine concepts that others keep separate. Veltar observed. Why keep them separate? Jung asked. Everything's connected anyway. Plants, rocks, people, stars. We're all made from the same basic elements, just arranged differently. That afternoon, Veltar visited the ship's medical bay to meet Dr. Choi, Unji. She was examining a human child who had injured his arm during the zero-gravity games. Hold still, Chanwoo, she said gently. I need to check if anything's broken. The boy, about 10 years old, was trying not to cry. Dr. Choi worked, quickly but carefully, using scanners to examine the injury. Good news, no breaks, just a bad bruise. You'll be fine in a few days. She applied a healing patch and smiled at the boy. But maybe be more careful with those spinning moves, okay? After the boy left, Dr. Choi turned to Veltar. I hope you don't mind me working while we talk. Medical needs don't wait for convenient timing. Of course, I'm curious about human medical practices. Do you treat injuries from recreational activities often? Pretty regularly. Humans like to push their limits, especially the young ones. But that's not necessarily bad. Physical challenges help develop coordination, problem-solving skills, and confidence. She was organizing medical supplies while she talked. The key is managing risk, not eliminating it. A communication alert sounded. Dr. Choi answered immediately. Doctor, we have a situation in engineering. Worker injured by electrical discharge, conscious but burned. On my way. Dr. Choi grabbed her emergency kit and headed for the door. Want to see how we handle real emergencies? She asked Veltar. They reached engineering to find a young woman sitting on the floor holding her arm. Her sleeve was burned and her face was pale, but she was alert and talking. I'm okay, she insisted. Just got careless with the power coupling. Let me decide if you're okay, Dr. Choi said firmly but kindly. She examined the burn carefully, asked questions about pain levels, and checked for neurological damage. Second-degree burns on the arm, minor electrical shock. You're lucky. Dr. Choi began treating the injury. What happened? Power surge during the repair work. I should have disconnected the backup line first. The woman winced as the doctor applied medication. Stupid mistake. Mistake, yes. Stupid, no, said Yoon Bo-ra, who had appeared with several other engineers. Happens to everyone eventually. Important thing is you're alive and we learned something. What impressed Veltar was the response. No one blamed the injured worker. Instead, they discussed how to prevent similar accidents. They modified procedures, added safety checks, and made sure everyone understood the new protocols. The injured woman participated in the discussion, sharing her perspective on what went wrong. Your people treat errors as learning opportunities rather than failures, Veltar observed. Well, yeah, said Yoon Bo-ra. Punishment doesn't fix problems. Understanding does. We're all trying to figure out how to live safely in an environment that wants to kill us. Every mistake teaches us something valuable. That evening, Veltar attended a cultural gathering in the ship's main hall. Teacher Nam Hee-won had organized an event where people shared stories, music, and art from their various backgrounds. Humans originated on one world, but you have many different cultures, Veltar noted. Earth had thousands of distinct cultures, Nam explained. Different languages, traditions, beliefs, and ways of life. When we went to the stars, we brought that diversity with us. A group of musicians played instruments Veltar didn't recognize. The music was complex with multiple rhythms and melodies weaving together. People clapped and swayed to the beat. Some began dancing, moving in patterns that seemed both planned and spontaneous. This music tells a story, Nam continued. It's about leaving home and finding new places to belong. The different instruments represent different voices, some happy, some sad, some uncertain, but they all come together in the end. An elderly man stood up and began telling a story in a rhythmic, poetic style. Even through the translator, Veltar could hear the beauty of the language and the power of the narrative. It was about explorers who sailed dangerous seas to find new lands, facing storms and monsters and loneliness. Are these historical accounts? Veltar asked. Some are. Some are myths, Some are completely made up, Nam said. But they're all true in their own way. They tell us about who we are and what we value. A young girl began reciting a poem about stars and dreams and the courage to reach for impossible things. Her voice was clear and strong, and when she finished, the entire gathering applauded warmly. Your children participate fully in adult cultural activities, Veltar observed. Of course. How else would they learn? Nam looked puzzled by the question. Culture isn't something you teach from books. It's something you live and share and pass on through experience. The evening continued with more music, stories, and performances. People of all ages participated. Some presentations were polished and professional. Others were clearly amateur efforts, but everyone received the same warm appreciation. Later, that night, Veltar was in his quarters updating his reports when he heard voices in the corridor. Through his door's audio pickup, he could hear two humans talking quietly. Worried about the long-range sensors. We're picking up some unusual readings. Unusual how? Ships, large formations heading this way, still too far out to identify, but the energy signatures don't match any known Confederation vessels. Should we report to the captain? Already did. He's calling a senior staff meeting for tomorrow morning. Veltar felt a chill. Unknown ships approaching could mean many things, and most of them were dangerous. He activated his communicator and sent a coded message to the Confederation monitoring station. If there was a threat developing, his superiors needed to know. The alarm that woke Veltar wasn't the gentle chime he'd grown used to. This was harsh, urgent, designed to cut through sleep and demand immediate attention. Red lights flashed in his quarters as the ship's communication system crackled to life. All hands to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Unknown vessels have entered sensor range and are approaching at high speed. Estimated contact in 6 hours. Veltar quickly dressed and activated his recorder. Whatever happened next would be unprecedented in galactic history. No species had ever chosen to fight Ravagers when they could run. The corridors were full of humans moving with purpose. But there was no panic, no screaming, no chaos. Children were being gathered into protective areas by calm adults. Engineers carried tools and equipment toward defensive positions. Medical staff prepared emergency treatment centers. Veltar found Captain Lee on the bridge, surrounded by displays showing the approaching fleet. The enemy ships were massive, dark, and clearly built for destruction. 23 vessels in total, each one larger than the biggest human ship. Status report, Lee requested. Enemy fleet is maintaining approach vector, reported Officer Ryu. No response to communication attempts. Estimated arrival time now 5 hours, 40 minutes. Defensive preparations? Commander Kim checked his displays. All civilian ships have moved to protected positions behind the asteroid field. Military modifications to the escort vessels are 60% complete. Fighter squadrons are ready for deployment. Veltar was amazed by the calm efficiency. You're really going to fight them? We're going to try diplomacy first, Lee replied. But yes, if they won't talk, we'll fight. We don't have any other choice. But they outnumber you 20 to 1. Admiral Kang Hyun-soo, who had arrived from the defense fleet, turned to face Veltar. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes like winter ice. Ambassador, has anyone ever told the Ravagers no before? No. Species that encounter them either escape or are destroyed. Then they've never learned that some things aren't worth the cost of taking. Admiral Kang smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Today might be educational for them. Dr. Park approached with a data pad. I've completed the analysis of Ravager psychology and tactics. They're completely confident in their superiority. They expect either immediate surrender or panicked flight. They've never encountered organized resistance. What do you recommend? Lee asked. Hit them with something they don't expect. Make them question their assumptions. Ravagers are predators. They understand strength, but they also understand when prey becomes too costly to hunt. Pilot Shin Jae-hoon entered the bridge. He was young, barely 25, but he moved with the confidence of someone who had never met a challenge he couldn't handle. Fighter squadron ready for deployment, sir. We've completed modifications to the weapon systems and installed the new targeting computers. New targeting computers? Veltar asked. Engineer Osiri looked up from her console. We analyzed the Ravager ship designs from the sensor data, found weak points in their armor and power distribution. The computers will automatically target those vulnerabilities. You developed new technology in 4 days? We improved existing technology, Osiri corrected. When you understand the basic principles, adaptation is just a matter of application. Veltar was beginning to understand that human technical capabilities were far beyond what their official technology level suggested. They didn't just use tools, they constantly improved them. Incoming transmission, announced Officer Ryu. The Ravager fleet is broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through. The main screen filled with the image of a Ravager commander. The creature was large, covered in dark scales with multiple eyes and razor-sharp teeth. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding metal. Small prey things. You will surrender your ships and your young. Resistance will result in pain. You have one of your time units to comply. The transmission ended. The bridge was quiet for a moment. Well, that was rude, commented Shin Jae-hoon. No offer of negotiation. No terms for peaceful resolution, noted Dr. Park. They're not interested in anything except domination. Captain Lee stood up slowly. Ryu, open a channel to the Ravager fleet. Channel open, sir. Lee's voice was calm and clear. Ravager Commander, this is Captain Lee Dong-ho of the Human Colony Fleet. We reject your demands. These are our ships, our families, our lives. If you want them, you'll have to take them by force. But understand this. We will make you pay a price that will haunt your dreams. He nodded to Ryu, who closed the channel. Think that'll make them reconsider? Asked Commander Kim. No, said Admiral Kang. But now they know what kind of fight they're walking into. The next hours passed quickly. Veltar watched as the humans completed their preparations with mechanical precision. Weapons were charged, shields were activated, and battle plans were distributed, but he also noticed smaller details that amazed him. Engineers were jury-rigging mining equipment into improvised weapons. Agricultural specialists were preparing chemical compounds that could be used as explosive charges. Even the teachers were contributing, using their knowledge of psychology to help design propaganda broadcasts aimed at disrupting Ravager morale. Your entire civilization is militarizing, Veltar observed to Dr. Park. Not militarizing. Defending. There's a difference. She was working on modifications to the communication system. We're not becoming warriors. We're just using everything we know to protect what we love. In the medical bay, Dr. Choi was preparing for casualties while also working on biological warfare countermeasures. Ravagers use bioweapons, she explained, to Veltar. Diseases designed to weaken prey species before capture. We're developing immunity boosters and treatment protocols. You're preparing for every possible scenario. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Basic human philosophy. 1 hour before contact, Veltar was on the observation deck watching the human fleet deploy. What he saw defied all military logic. The humans had positioned their weakest ships, the colony vessels full of civilians, in the most protected positions. Their strongest ships, a handful of modified escorts and patrol vessels, were spread out in a defensive screen, but they weren't just defending. As Veltar watched, small human fighters began launching from hidden positions in the asteroid field. They moved in complex patterns, using the rocky debris as cover while taking positions around the approaching Ravager fleet. Ambush positions? Veltar asked Commander Kim. First wave harassment. Make them think about what else they might not have seen. The Ravager fleet came into visual range like a dark storm cloud. Their ships were ugly, functional, covered in weapons and armor. They moved in a tight formation that spoke of absolute confidence. Contact in 30 minutes, announced Officer Ryu. Captain Lee activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In a few minutes, We're going to face an enemy that has never been defeated. They expect us to run or surrender. They think we're just another helpless prey species. His voice carried throughout the entire fleet, reaching every human in the convoy. They're wrong. We are human beings. We came to the stars not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. We built homes in the void not because we had to, but because we chose to. And we will defend those homes not because we're warriors, but because we're parents, partners, and protectors of everything we hold dear. Veltar could feel the change in the ship's atmosphere. The humans became calmer, more focused, more determined. Remember, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to convince them that we're too expensive to hunt. Make every shot count. Make every move cost them something. Show them that human beings don't surrender what matters to us. Contact in 10 minutes, Ryu reported. The Ravager fleet had spread into attack formation. Their ships were massive, bristling with weapons. Against them, the human defense looked pitiful, a handful of small ships and a cloud of tiny fighters. All units report ready, said Admiral Kang. Weapons charged and locked, reported Osiri. Fighters in position, added Shin Jae-hoon. Captain, Lee took a deep breath. Execute defensive plan Alpha, all units engage at will. The first shots came from the Ravager fleet. Massive energy beams lanced out toward the human positions. But the shots missed their targets as the human ships danced between the asteroids with impossible grace. Then the human fighters struck back. Veltar watched in amazement as the small human craft swarmed around the huge Ravager vessels like angry insects. They moved in 3 dimensions, using every piece of cover available. Their weapons were tiny compared to the enemies, but they were precisely targeted. Fighter Squadron Alpha, concentrate fire on the lead ship's power distribution node, commanded Shin Jae-hoon over the communication system. The human fighters converged on a specific point on the largest Ravager vessel. Their combined fire found the vulnerable spot that Osiri's analysis had identified. The massive ship's lights flickered as its power systems were disrupted. Direct hit. Target's weapon systems are fluctuating, reported one of the pilots. But the Ravagers weren't helpless. They began launching their own fighters, huge, heavily armed craft that looked like flying weapons platforms. The human pilots suddenly found themselves outnumbered and outgunned. Veltar woke to the sound of weapons fire in the distance. It had been 3 days since the first Ravager attack, and the situation had grown much worse. The enemy fleet that retreated had been just the advance force. The main Ravager armada had arrived with over 60 ships, and they had learned from their first defeat. This time, they weren't trying to capture the humans quickly. They were laying siege. The observation deck where Veltar stood showed a view of space filled with enemy vessels. They formed a loose ring around the human fleet, just outside effective weapons range. Occasionally, one would dart in to fire a few shots before retreating. They were testing defenses, looking for weaknesses, and slowly wearing down the human ships. "Good morning, Ambassador," said a voice behind him. Veltar turned to see survivor Lee Hae-young approaching with a cup of something that smelled like stimulants. "I brought you some coffee. Dr. Park thought you might need it." Lee Hae-young had earned her title during the first battle. She was a civilian coordinator who had organized the evacuation of non-essential personnel during the fighting. Now she was managing resource distribution for the entire fleet under siege conditions. "How are your people handling the stress?" Veltar asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Better than expected. Humans are surprisingly good at adapting to impossible situations." Lee Hae-young gestured toward the window. "We've been under siege for 3 days, and people are already finding ways to make it normal." She was right. As Veltar watched, he could see human activities continuing throughout the fleet. Children attended classes in protected areas. Engineers worked on repairs and improvements. Farmers tended to hydroponics gardens. People were living their lives despite being surrounded by enemies. "Your species refuses to allow external circumstances to control internal behavior," Veltar observed. "Something like that. We've learned that you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to it." An alarm sounded softly, Not the harsh emergency klaxon, but a gentle warning that had become routine. Another Ravager probe was approaching. Through the window, Veltar watched a single enemy ship speed toward the human defensive line. Human fighters launched to intercept it, moving with practiced efficiency. The Ravager ship fired a few shots at the colony vessels, then retreated as the fighters closed in. 17th probe today, Lee Hae-young noted, checking her tablet. They're getting more frequent. They're looking for something specific? Probably trying to find our weak points. Or maybe just trying to wear us down psychologically. She smiled grimly. They don't understand that humans get more stubborn under pressure, not less. Veltar followed Lee Hae-young to the central command area, where Captain Lee was meeting with his senior staff. The conference room had been converted into a combination war room and resource management center. Displays showed everything from weapon status to food supplies to psychological health reports. Current situation, Captain Lee requested. Commander Kim consulted his displays. Enemy fleet maintaining siege position. 63 vessels confirmed, possibly more outside sensor range. They're rotating ships regularly, so they're not suffering from fatigue like we are. Resource status? Food supplies holding steady thanks to the hydroponic gardens. Water recycling functioning normally. Power generation down to 80% of normal due to battle damage, but still adequate. Lee Hae-young read from her tablet. Medical supplies are running low, especially trauma treatment materials. Weapons and ammunition? Engineer O.C. Ree looked tired but determined. We're manufacturing replacement ammunition using raw materials from the asteroid field. It's slower than normal production, but we're keeping up with consumption. The bigger problem is spare parts for ship systems. How are we solving that? Cannibalization and creative engineering. We're taking non-essential components from civilian systems and modifying them for military use. It's not pretty, but it works. Dr. Park entered the room carrying a data pad and looking excited. I've been analyzing the Ravager communication intercepts. I think I've found something important. Explain. They're frustrated. The siege is taking much longer than they expected, and they're starting to have supply problems of their own. More importantly, they're arguing among themselves about strategy. Arguing how? Some of their commanders want to try an all-out assault. Others want to continue the siege. A few are suggesting they should retreat and find easier prey. Dr. Park smiled. We're becoming more trouble than they think we're worth. Captain Lee leaned back in his chair. So our strategy is working. Make ourselves too expensive to hunt. But how long can we maintain this? Asked Admiral Kang. Our people are getting tired. Constant alert status is wearing everyone down. Morale report? Lee asked. Medic Bae Soo-jin, who had joined the senior staff due to her psychological training, consulted her notes. Surprisingly good, actually. People are scared, but they're also angry, and angry humans are very dangerous humans. Explain. When humans are just afraid, they might run or surrender, but when they're afraid for their families and angry at the people threatening them, they become incredibly creative about fighting back. As if to prove her point, an announcement came over the ship's communication system. Attention all personnel. Saboteur Kim Young-ho reports successful completion of Operation Surprise Visit. Enemy supply convoy has been eliminated. Next mission launches in 6 hours. Veltar was confused. Saboteur Kim Young-ho used to be a mining engineer, Commander Kim explained. Now he leads raids on Ravager supply lines. He takes small teams out in modified mining pods to attack. They're logistics ships. That sounds extremely dangerous. It is, but it's also extremely effective. The Ravagers are having trouble keeping their fleet supplied because our raiders keep destroying their cargo vessels. Dr. Park pulled up a tactical display. The sabotage missions are part of a larger strategy. We're not just defending anymore. We're actively making their siege more costly. Veltar studied the display. It showed the positions of human ships, Ravager vessels, and the routes that Kim Young-ho's teams were using to strike at enemy supply lines. The pattern was incredibly complex and dangerous. How many people volunteer for these missions? More than we can use. Admiral Kang replied. We have to turn volunteers away. Everyone wants to hit back at the enemy. A young voice interrupted the meeting. Excuse me, sir. I have a message from the reconnaissance team. Veltar turned to see Park Chan-woo, the teenager who had been injured in the zero-gravity games weeks ago. He was now wearing a pilot's uniform and carrying military communications equipment. Report, Chan-woo, Captain Lee said. The Ravagers are positioning heavy weapons platforms on 3 of the larger asteroids. Commander Kim said you should know immediately. Heavy weapons? Admiral Kang looked concerned. What type? Long-range bombardment systems. If they get them operational, they'll be able to attack our ships from outside our defensive range. Captain Lee stood up quickly. How long until they're ready? Engineering estimates 6 to 8 hours, sir. That's not acceptable. We need to stop them. Lee turned to his staff. Options? Direct assault with our remaining fighters, suggested Admiral Kang. Too risky. They'll be expecting that, said Commander Kim. What about another sabotage mission, asked Osiri. The weapons platforms are too heavily defended. Our mining pods couldn't get close enough. Young Park Chan-woo raised his hand hesitantly. Sir, I might have an idea. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the teenager. Go ahead, Chan-woo, Captain Lee said encouragingly. Well, sir, those weapons platforms need a lot of power, and power systems are vulnerable to interference, right? What if we don't attack the platforms directly? What if we attack their power supplies? Engineer Osiri's eyes lit up. Electromagnetic pulse. If we could generate a strong enough EMP burst near those asteroids, the weapons platforms would be disabled without us having to get close enough for direct attack, finished Admiral Kang. But how do we generate an EMP that powerful? Asked Commander Kim. Osiri was already working on her tablet. We modify the power cores from 3 of our damaged ships, link them together in an unstable configuration, then detonate them at the right distance from the asteroids. That would destroy the ships completely, Captain Lee pointed out. Yes, sir, but they're already too damaged to be useful for much else. And we'd need someone to pilot them into position and set off the detonation. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone considered the implications. I'll do it, said Shin Jae-hoon. No, said Admiral Kang immediately. We need you for fighter. Command. I'll do it, said Park Chan-woo quietly. Absolutely not, said Captain Lee. You're 17 years old, but sir, I'm the best pilot for precision flying. And I'm small enough to use an escape pod to get away after setting the charges. Veltar watched the discussion with growing horror. These humans were calmly planning suicide missions, and their children were volunteering to carry them out. There has to be another way, Veltar said. Everyone turned to look at him. Ambassador? Captain Lee asked. Your people are talking about sacrificing ships and risking lives to stop these weapons platforms. But why not simply evacuate? Leave this area and find safety elsewhere. The room was completely silent for several. Veltar knew something had changed the moment he woke up. The ship felt different. The subtle vibrations that had become familiar during the siege were gone, replaced by a deeper, more powerful humming. When he checked his window, he understood why. The human fleet was moving, but they weren't running. They were advancing toward the Ravager siege line in perfect formation. Every ship, from the smallest fighter to the largest colony vessel, was moving with deadly purpose. Veltar quickly dressed and made his way to the bridge. What he found there made his internal temperature drop several degrees. The humans had transformed. Gone were the friendly, welcoming people he had come to know. In their place were focused, calculating predators. Their movements were precise and economical. Their voices were calm and cold. They worked with mechanical efficiency that would have impressed a machine intelligence. Status report, Captain Lee requested. His voice carried no emotion at all. All ships reporting ready for operation. Homecoming, Commander Kim replied. Weapon systems at maximum capacity. Defensive screens deployed. Target acquisition locked on primary objectives. Enemy response? Ravager fleet is moving to intercept. They appear confused by our approach vector. Engineer O.C. Ri looked up from her console. Weapon designer Lim Ji Hai reports that the impossible defense system is fully operational and ready for deployment. Impossible defense system? Veltar asked. Captain Lee turned to look at him. The man's eyes were like winter stars, beautiful and utterly cold. Ambassador, you're about to witness something that has never happened before in galactic history. You might want to record everything. What exactly am I going to witness? Humans who have stopped being polite. On the main display, the Ravager fleet was moving into attack formation. 63 massive warships spread out in a wall of destruction, their weapons powered up, creating a light show of deadly energy. They had finally decided to end the siege with overwhelming force. They had made a terrible mistake. All units, this is Captain Lee, came the announcement across the entire human fleet. The enemy has chosen to threaten our families with total destruction. They have rejected every opportunity for peaceful resolution. They have forced us to respond with measures we hoped we would never need to use. Veltar could hear the broadcast being transmitted on all frequencies. Every ship in both fleets was receiving the message. To the Ravager commanders, you chose this fight. You chose to threaten human children. You chose to ignore our warnings. What happens next is entirely your responsibility. You could have left. You chose to stay. Now you will learn why that was a mistake you will never have the chance to repeat. The channel closed. Captain Lee turned to his crew. Execute Operation Homecoming. All units full engagement. No quarter asked, none given. What happened next defied everything Veltar thought he knew about physics, technology, and the nature of reality itself. The impossible defense system activated first. Every human ship suddenly became surrounded by what could only be described as controlled gravity wells. Ravager weapons fire that should have destroyed the smaller vessels simply curved around them, bent away by localized space-time distortions. How is this possible? Veltar gasped. When humans refuse to accept limitations, interesting things happen, replied Osiri without looking up from her controls. But the gravity manipulation was just the beginning. As the human fleet closed with the enemy, they revealed modifications that shouldn't have been possible with their technology level. Colony ships unfolded weapon arrays that had been disguised as agricultural equipment. Civilian transports deployed, fighter squadrons that had been hidden in cargo bays. Mining vessels revealed that their drilling equipment had been converted into focused particle beam weapons. Strike Team Leader. Go Hyung-min's voice came over the communications. Alpha Strike Team engaging enemy command cluster. Target there. Coordination systems. Veltar watched as human fighters moved through the Ravager formation like deadly ghosts. They ignored the massive firepower being directed at them, protected by technology that bent the rules of reality. Their own weapons found every weak point, every vulnerability, every critical system that could disable an enemy vessel without destroying it. But it was the psychological warfare that truly terrified Veltar. Psychological warfare specialist Seo Inho had been broadcasting into the Ravager communication network. He was speaking in their own language, using their own cultural references, turning their own mythology against them. Your ships die around you, his voice echoed through the enemy fleet. Your weapons cannot touch us. Your strength means nothing. We are human. We are what you become when you refuse to surrender what you love. We are what waits in the dark between stars. We are your nightmares made real. The effect on the Ravager forces was immediate and devastating. Ships began breaking formation. Commanders started screaming contradictory orders. Some vessels tried to retreat while others pressed forward in desperate attacks. How do you know their psychology so well? Veltar asked Dr. Park. We studied them. For weeks, we analyzed every communication, every behavior pattern, every cultural reference in their databases. We learned how they think so we could break how they think. The human assault was surgical in its precision. They targeted command ships first, disrupting Ravager coordination. Then they disabled weapon systems, leaving enemy vessels helpless, but intact. Finally, they attacked propulsion systems, trapping the surviving ships in place. Not one Ravager vessel was completely destroyed. All were disabled, their crews alive, but helpless. "Why aren't you killing them?" Veltar asked in confusion. "Because we don't want to," Captain Lee replied. "We want them to live. We want them to remember this day. We want them to go back to their people and tell them what happens when you threaten human families." The battle lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it was over, the entire Ravager fleet was floating dead in space, their crews alive, but their ships completely disabled. "All units cease fire," Captain Lee ordered. "Begin rescue operations." Rescue operations? Veltar couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Ravager life support systems are failing on 12 ships. We're going to save them." And they did. Human. Medical teams boarded enemy vessels and treated wounded Ravagers. Human engineers repaired life support systems to keep enemy crews alive. Human psychologists provided counseling to traumatized enemy survivors. The Ravager commanders were brought aboard the New Soul for formal surrender. Veltar watched as the massive, terrifying aliens were escorted to the main conference room. They moved like broken creatures, their confidence and arrogance completely destroyed. The largest Ravager, the fleet commander, spoke in a voice that shook with fear. "What are you?" Captain Lee studied the creature for a long moment before answering. "We are human beings. We are parents and partners and protectors. We build things instead of taking them. We explore instead of conquering. We learn instead of destroying. But your power, your weapons, are things we created because you forced us to. We didn't want to fight you. We wanted to be left alone to build our new homes and raise our children. You could have had peace with us. Instead, you chose war." The Ravager commander's multiple eyes darted around the room nervously. "You will kill us now?" "No. We're going to send you home. Your ships are disabled but repairable. Your crews are alive and healthy. You're going to return to your people and tell them exactly what happened here." "And what will we tell them?" Captain Lee leaned forward slightly. "Tell them that humans are willing to be friends with anyone who approaches us in peace. Tell them that we'll trade, learn, share, and cooperate with any species that wants to build instead of destroy." He paused, and his voice became very quiet and very cold. "But also tell them that if anyone ever again threatens human children, human families, or human homes, we will not show the restraint we showed today. Today was us being merciful. Today was us holding back. Tell them they do not want to see what we become when we stop being merciful." The Ravager commander was shaking now. "How do we know you won't hunt us? How do we know you won't come to our worlds and take revenge?" "Because we're not like you," said Dr. Park gently. "We don't hunt people who can't fight back. We don't attack families or enslave children. We protect those things, even when they belong to our enemies." The surrender ceremony was brief and formal. The Ravager fleet was given supplies, basic repairs, and safe passage out of human space. As Veltar watched them leave, he realized that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The Ravagers would never again be the unstoppable force they once were. Their own terror would spread through their culture, and the story of their defeat would reach every corner of known space. More importantly, the message would be clear. Humans were not prey. That evening, Veltar attended what